Hello to both familiar faces and newcomers who are intrigued by the voice of photographers describing the page of their works. I'm Gabriele Chiapparini, welcome to this new episode of Small Photobook Cult. If you like our video, please like them, take some time to leave a comment and let us know what you think about. And please subscribe to the channel to stay updated on future videos. Today we will take a look at Engage and Destroy, a long-term study of the cultural effect of the constant war we are in. A powerful and frightening book that, with just the use of two types of images and a kind of accompanying text song, asks us to take the time to reflect on the kind of society we live in and the future that lies ahead. We are here with the photographer Jason Koxvold. Hello Jason, I'm glad to have this chat with you today.
Thank you, Gabriele. It's so nice to have a chance to speak with you. I appreciate it.
I thought, originally to find that maybe I could find more pictures in the book from the previews that I saw in the website and stuff. But in the end, no, it's just that portrait and the other portrait of people fighting. And it's really on point.
Yeah, it's really a very simple book. It's interesting. Sometimes people look at the previews from a book and they see 10 or 12 images and they expect everything in the book to be kind of that same subject matter or of that same quality, and their expectations are disappointed. But in this case, yes, it is very singular. This work is the result of it's a small subset of a much longer term project. And in this particular instance, I went to what was then called Fort Benning, which is now called Fort Moore. It may go back to being called Fort Benning again, depending on what the Republicans want to do. But nonetheless, it's a military basic training camp in Georgia where recruits go to be turned from kind of raw material into the beginnings of kind of a fighting machine. So I photographed them, I think, in May of 2021, and then right after they'd begun, and then came back again some months later in October of the same year, and used the same exact equipment, set up exactly the same way to try to visualize whatever change I could see in their faces and who they'd begun as and who they were becoming. And that became the book. And then every page is the same. I kind of harmonized all the heights so that, some of these men are 5'2", some of them are 6'4", but on the page, they're all the same size. So you're really drawn to their eyes and their features. So you can focus on that change within them. And then in the center of the book, there's a black and white section where I was allowed to photograph them doing what they call combative training, where they wrestle with no weapons with the intention of incapacitating their opponent as quickly as possible. So that's the base of the book. It's called Engage and Destroy because while I was making these photographs, I could hear chanting through the walls from a different classroom. And I asked what it was, and I was told it was soldiers practicing to recite the Soldier's Creed, which is the army's version of some kind of a manifesto. And the one part that is most striking to me about it, they say, "I vow to engage and destroy the enemies of the United States in close combat." And it's a very violent, intimate statement of intention that some soldiers do find themselves in. There are occasions when you find yourself without a knife or a gun or a grenade or whatever it may be, and you have to go hand to hand and become extraordinarily intimate with the person who you're trying to kill. Otherwise, they will kill you. So there's at the core of the project is this very primal desire to kill or be killed. And we're applying this doctrine, the army calls it army doctrine, to people from all walks of life and all ages. Some of these recruits are probably not yet 20 years old, they're probably 17. And then others are as old as, I think, 40. And so, of course, so many socioeconomic questions arise looking at that, in which we ask ourselves, why are they joining the army? What are they hoping to achieve? Is it to exercise some desire to become ultimate masculine symbol? Or is it, in some cases, a desire to receive the free college education that military members receive through the GI Bill? Or is it a desire to receive citizenship? This, military service is a fast-track path to US citizenship that otherwise can be quite hard to attain. So with all these various motivations why people join the military, there's kind of a very broad canvas, a wide pool of people who the army strives to turn into one exact kind of person, with different skills and whatnot. But the idea basic, as you probably know, is to strip away individuality and turn people into units, sort of battle-ready units. I was talking to another photographer at a book fair in Los Angeles this weekend, and he also teaches this kind of combative training. And he said that he can learn more about me in 2 minutes of wrestling with me than he could in a year of going out to dinner or having conversation with me. The intimacy of this very violent, very primal way of fighting tells you a lot about who a person is and what they expect to achieve. So, yeah, that's the backbone of the project. And it is part of a much broader project that involves landscapes, that features technology and surveillance and cultural imperialism and aspects like that. But this is a very focused group of images.
And you also decide to put some text in the back part of all the book.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are the words from the Soldier's Creed. And, normally when you see the Soldier's Creed, it's printed on one page. Normally when you hear it, it's recited. It takes about a minute and a half probably to recite. But I really like the idea of breaking it up and making it into a bit more of a tone poem. And by making those individual phrases more separated, it I think places greater weight on the words when you do find them in the book. As you see on some of the pages you're flipping through right now, there are musical notes at the bottom of the pages, and those are from taps, which is a slightly sad song that I think they play at the end of the day on any given military base. You've heard it in movies, I'm sure. This character, I think, is a particularly interesting one because he wants the camera, the photographer, the audience to know who he is and what he's doing. If I had to make assumptions about his motivations for joining and the person he hopes to become, he really looks like he wants to become the ultimate killing machine. And I think in terms of his transition from start to end of training, you can see that happening in his face. I'm fascinated by the aspiration on the left, the desire to be this thing that he's not quite yet. And on the right, he's on his way to becoming more muscular, more dangerous, more masculine, so many things. Whereas other characters begin their journey in a very vulnerable place and become kind of more confident. There's one character in here who begins... I always describe him as a beautiful boy when he begins, but by the end of the process, he's broken.
Which one is it?
Let me see if I can find the page. It's towards the second half of the book. I have it.
Is it in the second half?
Yeah. There he is. He is on page 162, 163. Yeah, that's good. This is really interesting. And most of these service members typically lose weight and become more muscular as the process continues. And he looks like he's gained weight and is markedly less confident in the second photograph. I don't know if he was bullied or hazed or if he couldn't meet the standards that were expected of him, but this is one of the ones I find quite heartbreaking in terms of who he's turning into.
Yeah, this process to have these two pictures together of the same person after like a while after the training, it's really powerful, because if you start looking for a while, you really can feel a lot of difference. Also probably stuff that you are not really seeing. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, very much so. I think I was surprised at how well most of these soldiers maintain their kind of resting face. The expression on their faces is often so similar, but internally you're starting to see change in the eyes, in the bodies. And of course, when you see a no image on the right, that represents someone who has fallen out of the process. And you're not allowed to quit, as I understand it. You have to be kicked out. So that can be for medical reasons. It can, in some cases, be death. And it sometimes can be just an inability to adapt to your new environment. So I can imagine that perhaps if you really want out, you think you've made a mistake, you can underperform deliberately to the extent that they do kick you out. But the way I understand it, the army will give people many, many chances, infinite chances. If they demonstrate an ability to try and a desire to perform, the army doesn't mind if you fail once or twice or even 5 times. They will always let you come back in and have another go. Maybe, I mean, basic is basic. You will learn certain skills. There's not much specialization within that. But once you then proceed to other disciplines, they'll let you try. If one discipline isn't working out, they'll let you try a different one. They'll let you retake a test, whatever it may be, to not drop out. So I think for people to drop out takes a pretty significant failing.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have the chance to speak with some of this guy during the process?
So I suppose I would have done, but the way it was set up was quite interesting and almost had to be this way in order to photograph 120 people in a short space of time. We were in a large classroom. I put some duct tape on the floor, two points basically where they're expected to place their feet. And they were cycled in quite violently by their drill sergeants. So they lined up in alphabetical order and just stepped in front of the camera. And typically I would take maybe a maximum of 5 shots of them to find their resting pose. Sometimes they would be laughing. On occasion, their friends would be making fun of them. But yeah, maximum 5 shots. And I would just say thank you for your time or thanks for participating. And I got very little in response back. There was no, each of these portraits probably took maybe 30 seconds to do all 5 shots. So I certainly didn't get to know any of them. And while in other scenarios when I'm making a portrait, I probably am trying to find some common ground or empathy or connection with the subject. In this case, what I wanted specifically was none of that. I wanted to reduce any external influence on them and have it just be a pure document of who they were on this day in this place.
Do you ask something before the portrait or not? Like in general to all the soldier, like I want you with this face, this attitude.
Yeah, no, just put your feet on that line, which hilariously was not everyone managed to do it. It took a little instruction. Put your feet on that line and remove any expression from your face. Give me as little as possible.
Yeah, it's quite tough. Like it's really, you can see anyway something behind the faces.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Like to look at someone, to make eye contact with someone can be difficult for many people. I really enjoy eye contact. When I'm talking with someone, I tend to look directly into their eye, and not everyone likes that. I think there's something similar in terms of the relationship between a subject and the lens. I'm behind the camera. I know there are photographers who over the years have done special tricks with mirrors and two-way glass to make it seem like there's no camera there. in this case, I stood directly behind the camera, probably with my eyes just above the hot shoe. So I'm making eye contact with them so they have somewhere to look. So if anything, they're maybe just their eye line is just above the lens itself. Except for this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a directness that I was looking for, and I think it manifests itself in different ways. This guy is very calm. This guy almost looks like he's trying to connect with me. I think they're all maybe connecting with me in different ways. I love the change between 1 and 2 in this. The first one is very direct. The second one is almost more aloof, more tough.
This one that we are watching now?
Yeah. Oyeleke. I think he's Nigerian. And the funny thing is, I mean, from a post-production standpoint, while I shot with the same camera, the same lights, the same background, the images did take a surprising amount of work to harmonize and make sure that the color temperatures were the same. And so I ended up looking at these images for quite long periods of time. And one of the strange things about that is I felt like I developed some relationship with their image in the computer. So I know them at this point far better than they knew me. They met me for 30 seconds twice. And I met them for hours upon hours upon hours. And I've looked at their faces and tried to imagine who they are and where they come from, and what their motivations might be for joining the military. Because once, having had a chance to spend a lot of time with deployed soldiers in places like Afghanistan and Kuwait, once you meet someone who's been in for 3 or 4 years or longer, they'll be much more honest with you, I think, about what the experience has been like for them than they are at this point, as I photographed it here. They have expectations of what the military will be, but they haven't yet had a chance to discover what the reality is.
Yeah, also this aspect, I think it's really fascinating because like you are not portrayed proper soldier. They are still not. They are becoming soldier, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, and that's a really interesting question as well, because, I mean, I've had a few really unexpected communications from soldiers and veterans. One day my phone rang and it was a number in Washington State, so probably a few hundred miles away. And I didn't answer it because I don't answer unknown calls, but he left a voicemail and it said, "Hey, I was in the unit that you photographed, but I don't remember you coming to see us. How did you get these photographs?" And the implication was that maybe I'd stolen them, perhaps from some personnel records. So I called the guy back and I asked him what his interest was and tried to just address his questions as best I could. And it was kind of entertaining. The reason he wasn't in the photographs is because his name, I think his last name didn't begin with a letter after like J in the alphabet. So it turned out that when I said, "Can I get 120 people?" or whatever it was I'd asked for, they just split the unit basically down the middle and said, "All right, everyone whose last name begins with J or after, you're going to be here at this place at this time on this day." But yes, I've received questions around, why are you not making these soldiers look like heroes? This isn't the way that soldiers are supposed to be portrayed. And my answer to that is, I'm not portraying them as heroes or villains, good guys or bad guys, just people who are on a journey that is a very specific, very difficult, challenging journey that asks a lot of the participants. The intent is not to lionize them or make them seem larger than life. It's simply to try to follow along with them on that journey and understand what we ask of soldiers. Because I think that's something that typically isn't addressed in public discourse is, we're happy to say thank you for your service. We're happy to grill some sausages on Memorial Day. but what are we really asking people to do in terms of giving up years of their life to go and fight in wars that they may or may not agree with tools that they may or may not be happy with, in places that they may or may not want to go to.
Also because it's not a really calm moment in the world. Like probably if you choose to join in the past 3, 4, 5 years, it's really a hot moment.
No, it's a great point. I know of plenty of people who signed up before 9/11, and it's fascinating watching what people expect of their time in the service, right? So some people want a secure job that will be relatively safe and that will teach them skills that they can apply later in life in other professions. And some people really want to go and kill. And you hear it a lot. It's, finally a chance to deploy and do what I was trained to do, which I think is an interesting point of view, right? We like to talk about strength or deterrence through strength, and about how having the biggest military in the world and spending the most money on it, the point of all that is to prevent people from bringing the fight to us. But the reality is that for the last 50 years or so, we've been bringing the fight to other people, going to their part of the world and parking an aircraft carrier off their shore and telling them what they should and shouldn't do, and then, rattling our sabers. So some people really long for that. They yearn for it. It's a test. It's the ultimate test of who you may be as a man, is, if you can go out and fight and come back. And of course, it's not until after all that has happened that people start to really understand the mental scars and the physical scars that combat leaves on people.
I was reading this autobiography of military pilots, and it was really curious to me reading a part of the book. So it was happened like the Balkan War at that time, and this military pilot was somewhere in the United States, in Nevada probably, and he and his squadron was a bit scared that they're not gonna to be called. Like, he was quite old at that moment, and he said, "Fuck, probably I'm not gonna to be in a proper war anytime. It's not gonna happen. If I'm gonna to miss this, I'm gonna to miss it forever. So if nothing happened, like if a war is not gonna happen, there is also this kind of thoughts that maybe you waste your time in some way."
Yeah, that's so interesting, isn't it? Because it assumes that combat and war is something to aspire to. And I think that that's perhaps in large part due to all of the entertainment that's made around war, all the propaganda that's made around war. One of the things that I struggle with and I talk about to people, and they don't typically like hearing this, is the idea that the average citizen has a hard time differentiating entertainment from news. We watch Zero Dark 30, for example, and assume that it's a document of fact. When we do that, we take sides with the characters in the film, and we think, well, you might have to torture a few people to get to the truth to finally find Osama, but that's, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. And so all of this entertainment that we willingly consume, Hollywood churns out so much more war communications than arts movies or, romance movies, probably, that it's become one of the primary ways in which we internalize ideas about conflict. And so, especially in this time of we talk about toxic masculinity a lot. I think in large part, it's because of things like this, because we have some desire to kill people we've never met. And again, I think we enjoyed a long period of relative peace after the Second World War because so many people had seen the reality of war, seen the horrors of it, that rather than making it seem like some optimal scenario that we should strive for, the goal was to avoid war at all costs because we'd seen how much damage it did up close.
How was to have the access of it? Like, was it easy to have access to this place?
It's a great question. So this place, yes, it was quite easy, and that's for a few reasons. One is because this was one of the most recent. You wouldn't call it an embed because I didn't deploy or anything, but photographic projects with the military. So at this point, I know the process fairly well. When I first began, it was very difficult to get access because I was intimidated by the military. I perceived it as one kind of monolithic political unit who probably didn't agree with my points of view. I later found that not to be the case. I found that the surprising amount of people I met felt similarly to me. But yeah, in the United States, at least, I think there's a really robust system of public affairs within the military. And the goal of the public affairs group is to spread good PR about what the military is doing. It is to reward people, journalists and photographers who can help spread that message and get it out in the world. And so when I call and say, hi, can I come and photograph recruits at the beginning and end of their training cycle? The assumption on the military side is that I want to help kind of spread the good word. The reality is that it's an artistic project for me, almost an academic project in terms of wanting to see if I can visualize the change in people's bodies and faces. It's not about good PR or bad PR. It's a psychological experiment in some way. But yes, if you know how to ask the question in the right way, oftentimes it's quite easy to get access in the States.
And so what happened after? Like, you show up with this work, and what happened?
The trainer who was teaching these wrestling combative movements, he was a really interesting guy who, for his own purposes, wanted to get photographs of the work he was doing. So he was inclined to help me, but he was not a public affairs guy. He was a trainer. So he emailed me some months after making these images, and he said, hey, by the way, I'll be back at Fort Moore doing a whole week of training, and you're welcome to attend for as much or as little as you like. You can come for the whole week if you want. I said, okay, great. That sounds wonderful, because I felt like I didn't quite have enough. So I said, should I just show up, or do I need to go through public affairs? And he said, oh, yeah, just run it through public affairs as a courtesy, but I'm sure they'll say yes. Interestingly, they did not say yes. They said that some of the techniques they would be training that week were classified or sensitive and not okay for public release. And I think what had happened was they had seen these images, which are very stark, close up. There's a little bit of blood, not a lot, but they reflect the reality of hand-to-hand combat so closely that they perceived it was not in their interest to allow me to create any more of this. That's my understanding of it. I can't imagine they had some special kind of Vulcan neck pinch move that was still classified that no one could see reflected in a still photograph.
You send to the military the same images I'm watching, or you also took some pictures?
Yeah,
in another way for the army.
This is it. What you're seeing is what I shot. There's obviously images I didn't use in the book, but typically, for better or for worse, I have an idea about what I want to photograph, and I only photograph that. Every now and then I get an opportunistic photograph that might be special, or worth something. But especially in the case of this session, one of the challenges I found was that, you know, because they're accustomed to photojournalism, and photojournalists typically show up with a wide angle lens or a zoom lens, and they go click, click, all right, cool, what else? They're not thinking about lighting or composition as much. They're not, I mean, you know, when we photograph stuff like this, we kind of overshoot it. We're going to shoot, I mean, I probably shot 400 stills because there'll be motion blur, and there'll be, because there's so much movement in the shots, then my composition might be bad in many of them. So I showed up with what I wanted. I wasn't able to even get set up in time because they had only budgeted, you know, an hour or something for me with these fighters. And so I was able to change my flight for later that day and come back and do 2 hours with them. But even that wasn't really enough. So I was very much focused on what I wanted to get. And that was all this. So there were never any pictures of, I mean, there might have been 2 pictures of like smiling people shaking hands after the contest. But typically it was this. And I suppose I could be better about giving people what they want more. But if I'm given the choice of getting what I need versus creating additional images to make other people kind of feel better, I'll usually focus on getting what I need. Otherwise, I have to come back again, and getting to Georgia from Oregon is a whole thing. So I prefer to try and maximize my time on the ground while I'm there.
And do you think it's gonna to be harder for you to do project like this one right now because they know the kind of work you're doing, or not?
You know, there was one particular instance where I went to Afghanistan and I made photographs that were kind of like this in terms of it wasn't heroic. It was just what the reality of our occupation of Afghanistan looked like. And those pictures ran in a couple different magazines. And in one of them specifically, I was asked to write captions. And so I wrote honest captions describing what I'd seen. And the army was really angry about it. And I got this raging email saying, like, if we'd have known you were going to do this, we would never have had you visit us in Afghanistan. And then after that, I found that some of the doors I was knocking on for other parts of this project were slamming shut. And it became frustrating. And I felt like maybe they have some blacklist. And so I reached out to a colleague in the Air Force and I said, hey, I'm finding like these doors are slamming shut. And he said, oh, that's so surprising. We really liked the work you did in Afghanistan. So that was enlightening in terms of showing me that different branches of the service and different individuals within those branches have very different responses to the stories you're trying to tell. And he was able to open a whole bunch more doors for me. So I guess with that said, if I called Fort Moore again and said, hi, I'd like to come back, the answer would probably be no. But that doesn't mean that someone else hasn't seen the work and liked it, or that doesn't mean that someone else has never heard of me, and would be inclined to help me. And on my website, you can see, you do enough of this kind of work that you start getting commissioned to do it for magazines and newspapers as well. And those images tend to be a bit more aligned with the stories the military wants to tell. So those might be the images that they see, and have a different sensation of what I'm going to do. But I'm always honest these days. When I start setting up a project like this, I say, look, I respect a strong military, but I am anti-war. So just so you know, when you see the work running, don't expect it to be some jingoistic piece of propaganda. It's going to be the closest I can get to an honest, impartial depiction of the reality of combat, training, whatever it may be.
And how was the reaction of the public?
That's a great question. I think, so having just come back from a book fair where we were showing this book, a lot of the time people will come over and pick up the book and kind of chuckle at the title and open it up and then immediately close it again. I think that in general, we have a way of interacting with ideas around war that most people prefer to watch, Top Gun Maverick than look at a book like this. There's something that, I became quite close with a number of active duty people who run a website that's all about military strategy. And something they talk about a lot is the civ-mil divide. And I think, as I understand it, it's the idea that civilians have no idea, no concept or desire to know what the reality of military life is. We prefer to package it neatly with statements like freedom isn't free and like honor the fallen and whatnot. But those don't do much except pay lip service to the reality of military service. So I think generally in the civilian public, it's not especially interesting to people. If you have friends and family who've served, if you've served yourself, I think that's where I see people buying the book.
How is like to work in a similar project and context for you? Like to be inside something like this, that you are criticizing it in some way. How is the feeling of being there?
Right. Yeah, I think especially in my first embed in Afghanistan, I felt that somewhat, but the military is so used to seeing photographers along for the ride at this point that for them it's not strange. And so for me, it ceases to be strange. And I do have a genuine interest in the people I'm photographing. And I think that especially for people who have spent the last 7-8 months in a bunker in Q8 or something, to find someone who comes in and is polite and friendly and wants to hear their story, because that's honestly, especially for projects where I'm embedded, if I went in there and wasn't interested in talking to people, I wouldn't get good images. The best images I've got are from conversations I've had with folks. Like there was an Air Force historian out in Afghanistan, and he was asking me about what I was doing. He said, "Oh, you know what you'd like is there's some amazing murals on the other side of the base. We can hop in a Jeep and go look at them if you want." And without that conversation, I never would have found that thing. And so people are excited to share that their reality, which otherwise I'm sure becomes excruciatingly mundane, repeating the same processes day in, day out. And also excited. I think there's a real frustration in the military where people come up to them in airports and say, "Thank you for your service," and then walk off without any further interaction. And the people I know hate that. They feel like they've been reduced to symbols. And kind of, as we were talking about before we started recording, symbols of this kind of post-truth moment we're living in, where we talk about invading Iraq and being welcomed as liberators, or saying things like freedom isn't free. I think the opportunity to be seen is really meaningful to the subject of a lot of these photographs. And so they're welcoming to me in that regard, in terms of they see me as someone who can help them be seen. So I don't feel out of place necessarily. And it could just be that I've done it enough times that I've become inured to it a bit.
Jason, what is for you the role of the artist today?
I mean, in the context of stories like this, I see my role as potentially bridging a gap between theory and practice, by using tools and techniques that have become so normalized in terms of the making of propaganda. By making a work like this, I'm not only able to explore the people inside the bodies that I'm photographing, but also to potentially demonstrate the implicit contrasts and conflicts between how we are accustomed to consuming images and what that image can actually mean. I think photography has been so subverted at this point by the ubiquity of the image in social media, in marketing, that now we have expectations. The image's primary role in this day and age is a capitalist role. If you're photographing a woman, she should be beautiful. If she has veins and wrinkles and spots, they should be photoshopped out. If you're photographing a soldier, he should look heroic. All of this stuff in the service of essentially promoting profit. And so if I can make photographs that contradict that narrative in some way, I think that's actually more shocking than the subject matter in the photography itself. The idea that photographs can serve other purposes outside of corporate profit is, I think, in this moment, quite a radical idea. So I enjoy the opportunities to do that where I can. And if it affects some small subset of the population that's interested in these matters, then, maybe I've done my job.
I want to ask you if you want to add something, because otherwise I'm starting with the standard question that I ask to the end of each episode. But if you want something that you really want to say, this is the moment.
No, I think in making this work, I'm extraordinarily grateful to everyone who participates in it. And that can be at the institutional level, the people who open the doors and allow me in, and then the actual subjects themselves, because there's a really interesting tension in these. I've received some emails from people saying, the men you're photographing, you're making them look like automatons, unthinking robots who have no agency. And I said in response, just to be clear, these men were ordered to participate. They didn't have a choice. That is the way the military works. You do what you're told or face consequences. And so that's a very interesting dynamic. It was not optional for them to participate, but I am grateful for their participation and everyone who does participate in these things. It's one of the things I love about doing work like this, is that it allows me to meet people from radically different walks of life and have typically really brief, meaningful conversations with them. Just last week, I was doing a commission for the New Yorker in maximum security prisons in Washington state, and I probably photographed 40 or 50 different people who have murdered, in some cases, more than one person. And I had brief, meaningful conversations with many of them that were respectful and polite and taught me so much. So any interaction like that, I'm grateful for. So yeah, I just want to say that, really. For anyone who's listening, who I've photographed, thank you for letting me do this.
It's a really beautiful thought.
It kind of came of receiving nearly angry emails and phone calls from people. It made me realize what a privilege it is to be able to do this, and that it wouldn't happen without the person in front of the camera.
No, of course. I think that the interaction and the relationship in general with the subject, it's something that you really have to take care of. Also, if it can also be just for a few seconds, like in this case.
Yeah, very much so.
Do you learn something doing this project that can help a new and young photographer approaching photography right now to do a better job?
That's a great question. I think definitely. And in this project, maybe in the same way as every project I do, I saw something the other day. Someone was saying, like, all you have to do is ask. Maybe not all you have to do, but asking is, more than half the battle. So if there's something you want to do, ask. And if the answer is no, ask someone else. And if the answer continues to be no, find some way of doing it that doesn't rely on other people's generosity or risk, right? There's always a risk for the people who agree to let me go and do a job like this. Probably the guy in the army who sent me that angry email after Afghanistan, probably he was afraid that his boss was going to come down on him like a pile of bricks. So there is risk for you as a photographer, for the person who is helping you, and it's so easy for people to say no. I've found that more often than not. But sometimes they say yes. And so you always have to assume or hope that they will. Don't kind of cut off the possibility before exhausting every avenue that you can to try to get what you want to get.
And the very last question, can you suggest us a book to have in one of the next episodes of the podcast?
Oh gosh, I didn't prepare for this. A book. I mean, I have so many favorite books that.
One that you really like.
Okay, how about this one? Yeah. So I was in Los Angeles and had an opportunity to buy a book that was self-published by an artist called Umaima Bentanfous. She's actually Tunisian, and she grew up between Tunis and Montreal. And this book is called Between Eye and Lands. And I just really enjoy work from the Middle East region that normalizes and popularizes the beauty and the culture of those places. So I was really impressed with that book. I heartily recommend it.
Thanks so much, Jason. It was perfect. I wrote down a lot of questions, but you replied to everything without asking. So it was a really, really good presentation.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's interesting. Unless we talk about work like this, unless I talk about work like this, the ideas kind of remain buried in clay or something. So I appreciate the opportunity to let me work out some of these thoughts on the air.
Yeah, but there is always this question of speaking or not speaking about projects. And I think it's really beautiful and good to speak about. And then if you want, you decide to not listen it. But I don't know, I'm really interested about the specific point of view of the person that decide to do a project. There are a lot of so many questions to ask. Why, how, when, how long. There is a lot of things. Also, I know that a lot of people probably listen to this podcast want to know more about like the equipment of the photographers, and maybe I'm starting to ask questions also about that, because in the end it's of course we always said that it's not important, but in some way you decide maybe what kind of camera are you going to use for that project, or you decide for another one.
It's a huge factor, yeah. I mean, if you're curious to know what I shot this with, this book, actually, this is quite an interesting question, I think. So I used to shoot pretty much exclusively 4x5 film. And then after coming back from Afghanistan and spending thousands of dollars on buying the film and processing it and scanning it, a lot of it was damaged by x-rays. Mm-hmm. And then it was just, I can make landscapes all day long with 4x5 without feeling too much pressure. But if something's moving in front of you, or if the group that you're with is moving fast, and in the case of Afghanistan, they were always hustling me along because you don't want to stand in the same place for more than a few minutes. So at that point, I made the decision to go to medium format digital, but I had to make myself a promise that I would not shoot any more 4x5 film, because medium format digital is like a very large upfront investment, and 4x5 is a very large ongoing investment. Yeah. And so I couldn't do both. So I basically had to figure out ways of making the digital format have the same kind of visual quality that I enjoy about 4x5. And I sometimes think, well, wouldn't the images be better had I done them on film? And maybe they would, but then at the same time, they wouldn't exist because I couldn't have done them using film.
Of course.
So that's the tension there. But yeah, this was done with a phase 1, wirelessly linked to some strobes, and it's a very easy might not be the right word, but once you have the system set up, it's incredibly repeatable and generates beautiful files that you can work with well. And
okay,
awesome.
Jason, thank you so much. I think we are done.
Thank you, Gabriele. That was really wonderful getting a chance to talk with you. I look forward to more conversations.
I'm really waiting for the next one. I'm really cool for the big one, the huge.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I'm so preoccupied in mostly making books for other artists that it's been on the back burner for a while. But
yeah, but
it's so close.
It's really good. We also have to say that you are the owner of the publisher that produced this book, right? If you want, you can spend some word about that. How it is to run a publishing house, because it's the first time that I interview. No, it's not the first time. Also, not use any tempo. It's with Trespasser.
No, it's interesting. I mean, Gnomic Book was born out of a desire to make my own work initially, and then Knives being the first book I made was very much a tonal statement of intent of the other kinds of work I'd be interested in making. So I see Gnomic as ideally an international publisher. We do end up publishing more American artists than others, simply because that's where we are. But we've had a chance to publish work about Oman, publish work by a wonderful artist from Iran.
It's true, because you publish also a book called Like something.
Yeah, by Ryan Dabolsky.
It's amazing. I have that book. It's so good.
Yeah, I wish we'd made more of those. You never know. I had a really good feeling about it, but you never know. Especially when I made that book, I didn't know if people would care about that part of the world or the stories in the book. And I would love to have had another few hundred copies. Now it's really hard to find.
Yeah, it is. I knew, and I'm really glad that I bought when it came out, like some years ago, right? 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, 2020. Oh, yeah, we printed it on March 13th, 2020.
Oh, yeah, time pass.
Right before the pandemic.
It's really good. It's an amazing book. I suggest you, if you never watch it, to go and search for it, because it's amazing. Also, if you have the chance to watch it online, and maybe if we can do an episode about also that book, it can be really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. We can. I mean, I'm sure Ryan would love to talk about it as well.
So, thanks so much again. I'll see you for the next.
Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Ciao, Jason. Bye-bye.
Ciao. Bye-bye.